What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Tomatolito Show. And the UFC has been putting on some amazing shows, and this weekend is one to not disappoint. Now, I have to tell you, I think maybe this weekend I'm looking at this card and all the amazing fights that have been scheduled for this card. The one that fell through is sad to say, because that's the one that I was really looking forward to, the comeback of TJ Dillashaw. But I don't know about you guys. I still haven't recovered from UFC 261, and it hit me last weekend while I'm watching the UFC fights. I tuned in just for the sake of watching, but I wasn't really into it because I was still thinking about the previous weekend and UFC 261. With that said, we'll revisit those fights here in a second, but let's do right by the card that's coming this weekend. Corey Sandhagen versus TJ Dillashaw was supposed to be the main event. This is UFC Vegas 26, live from the Apex. There's a new main event. TJ Dillashaw suffers an injury. He pulls out. That fight's going to be postponed and announced for a later date, but no date in mind yet. And Michelle Waterson is going to be moved up to the main event. Michelle Waterson will be facing Marina Rodriguez. Michelle Waterson steps into the octagon with an 18-8 record against Marina Rodriguez's 13-1-2. This is going to be the new main event in the women's flyweight division. And of course, Michelle Waterson brings that huge following that she's been able to amass through the years, from her dancing videos to the fans just wanting to tune in to watch her because she's just a good-looking lady. So Michelle Waterson, 18-8, is a new main event for the women's flyweight against Marina Rodriguez. Now, the co-main event is none other than the Cowboy, Donald Cerrone, who steps in with a 36-15 record. 2 fights, no contest in his career against Alex Morono, 18-7 record, and that's a welterweight matchup. That's going to be the co-headlining fight. In the welterweight division as well, we're going to see Neil Magny. Last time we saw him was against Michael Chiesa. Neil Magny has a 24-9 record, stepping in against Jeff Neal. That should be a fight full of fireworks. Neil Magny against Jeff Neal, 13-3 record. Carlos Diego Ferreira in the lightweight division. Carlos Diego Ferreira against Gregor Gillespie. 13-1 Gregor Gillespie against 17-3 Carlos Diego Ferreira. Gillespie's sole loss came at the hands of, what's that fighter's name? I'm trying to remember his last defeat. He got knocked out. They were in New York. He got knocked out where his head ends up against the cage. And what was this fight? I can't remember this fighter. Kevin Lee. Wow, how could I forget Kevin Lee's name? So Kevin Lee knocks him out in the first round. I think it was within the first 3 minutes of the fight or so. They just go at each other. The head kick lands and then followed by the punches. Gregor Gillespie just suffered a nasty knockout that night. If I remember correctly, that fight was in the undercard. That was one of the undercard fights for the BMF belt versus Masvidal against Diaz, right? So I'm almost positive that was it. That was UFC 244, if I remember correctly. Gregor Gillespie's back. This is a huge fight for the lightweight division. Gillespie against Carlos Diego Ferreira. This is a stacked card that we have here coming up this Saturday. Let me look at the other fights. Man, TJ Dillashaw pulls out. That I was hoping to see his return and see how he looks after such a long layoff after he got caught with those doping violations. I was looking forward to seeing his return. Huge fan of his. Amanda Ribas is going to be fighting 10-2 record against Angela Hill. That's going to be another fight. That's another entertaining matchup right there. Angela Hill, Amanda Ribas, Carlos Diego Ferreira, Gregor Gillespie. Mo Green fighting Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Neil Magny, Jeff Neal should be a really good one. Donald Cerrone, he's always fun to watch. And of course, the new main event, Marina Rodriguez, Michelle Waterson. In the prelims, you got Phil Haas, he's going to be in action. Mike Trizano's going to be in action. And then up-and-comers, Park Jung-young against Stefan and Chewy. And then Christian Aguilera against Carlston Harris. That should be the opening card. Phil Haas facing Kyle Dawkins. And Ludovic Klein's going to be facing Mike Trizano. So it's an interesting preliminary card. The main event card is going to be kicked off by Angela Hill and Amanda Ribas. And that's going to be a way to kick off the main event card. And then it's just one after the next, after the next, after the next. They're all entertaining fights. Great fighters. Awesome card that they managed to put together for UFC Vegas 26. And we'll see when they release the news of Dillashaw Sanhagen when that gets rescheduled. This past weekend, we saw the whole card, interesting fights through and through. But the main two, the co-main event and the main event, Giga Chikadze ends up stopping Cub Swanson by way of a kick to the body and just drops Cub Swanson. The fight is stopped. Giga Chikadze ends up improving to a 13-2 record. And then the main event, Jiri Prochazka against Dominic Reyes. Dominic Reyes suffers a nasty knockout in that spinning elbow that Prochazka catches Reyes with. Man, they were going at each other. Prochazka's just a scary dude when he's coming forward the whole time. His posture, his attack, his approach. Dominic Reyes was on the backpedaling for a huge portion of the fight. He caught Jiri several times, but it never managed to switch the momentum to his favor. Dominic Reyes, game as ever, but got caught with that spinning elbow and went face first onto the mat. Prochazka is in line to face none other than Blachowicz for a title shot. Those were the two main event fights. Cub Swanson, unfortunately, he's always a fun fighter to watch, but he suffered a nasty kick to the body, to the abdomen, and just put him out. Like I said at the beginning, I still hadn't recovered from UFC 261. What an event that was. Very few cards in my memory have caused such an impact to me, to where it just leaves me thinking days after, well after the card happens, I'm thinking about this fight or that. I remember of years past when Chuck Liddell stops Tito Ortiz. I was such a huge Tito Ortiz fan. Chuck Liddell stops him. Rampage coming onto the scene and knocking Chuck Liddell out to take that title. Wow. I mean, it's just so many fights that I could, well, not that many fights, but definitely some fights that have caused an impact in my time as a fan, as an analyst, as a viewer. There's been a few, there's those that have shaken you, that you've just been, especially back in the day, because there wasn't as many UFC events. So when you saw them, you were bound to be talking about them for a longer period of time than you do now. It seems like almost every week or every other week there's a UFC event. So you get lost in these, and a lot of these fights get forgotten about. UFC 261 did not disappoint, and they just left you in awe of what you saw. The main event, of course, the story of the night was Kamaru Usman knocking Jorge Masvidal out clean. No disputing who the man is in the welterweight division. Kamaru Usman, who Jorge Masvidal was saying that he punched soft, he ate his words. Jorge Masvidal, game bred, the game fighter that he is, he wanted a stand-up fight with Kamaru Usman, and Kamaru Usman delivered. He knocks Jorge Masvidal out clean. Jorge Masvidal didn't even know what happened when they start sitting him up. Kamaru Usman defends his title, sits with a 19-1 record now, and I don't see anybody taking that title from him. He's starting to lap everybody, like he said. Colby Covington, he already beat him once. I don't see Colby Covington beating Kamaru Usman. Tyrone Woodley is on his way out of the UFC, it seems like. I don't see that fight happening again. I don't know. I don't know who could be a threat to Kamaru Usman's reign, but the reign is real. The champ is for real, and he's delivering, and he's looking better and better every single fight. Jorge Masvidal suffers a knockout, falls to a 35-15 record, and even he was impressed with the knockout. And no excuses given by Jorge Masvidal, the true professional that he is. That's the reason people love him. That's the reason I'm a fan of him. He just tells it like it is, Kamaru Usman, Jorge Masvidal delivered, the main event delivered. What a knockout, what an impressive way for Kamaru Usman to retain his title and to put to rest all the BS going on between these two fighters, the back and forth. The last time was the 6-day notice that Jorge Masvidal steps in to fight Kamaru Usman at Fight Island. On 6 days' notice, he cuts a huge amount of weight, 19 pounds, I believe, or so. 17 pounds or 19 pounds within a week's time. And he makes weight. He ends up fighting. It goes all the way to a decision. And this time, Jorge Masvidal was set to take the title. He was so hungry for that title. He receives a title shot, and he thought he was going to walk away with that title. And he was looking good, too, at the beginning of the fight. Just having an answer for everything that Kamaru Usman was throwing at him. Kamaru Usman, he figured him out. He faked him out, caught him on the chin, right on the button, and turned those lights out. What a fight that was. If that wasn't enough, if that wasn't the way to close the night, I don't know what could have been, because before that fight even took place, the undercard, the co-main event, the women's strawweight champion Weili Zhang loses her title, gets stopped, gets knocked out by Rose. Thug Rose is a champ once again. She's the strawweight champ. She regains her title. What a story. Thug Rose stops Weili Zhang, the scary Weili Zhang. Thug Rose is back. Anything she sets her mind to, she accomplishes. She regained her title. She is back at the top, and you couldn't be happier than that. What a perfect way to set up that main event between Usman and Masvidal. Just before that, Valentina Shevchenko, just dominant performance. A dominant performance over Jessica Andrade. Jessica Andrade, of course, the one who dropped Thug Rose on her head and ends up derailing the plans, takes the title, loses the title to Weili Zhang. She is on the undercard of this. She challenges for the title against Valentina Shevchenko after having lost her title to Weili Zhang, moves to the flyweight division, now challenges Shevchenko for the fight, for the title, and Shevchenko just demolished her. Started a little bit slow, and then the dominance just takes over. Valentina Shevchenko is in the prime of her career. She has set herself on cruise control at the peak of her career, and I don't see anybody derailing her anytime soon. The only person out there that people keep mentioning is another fight against Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes is the champ and the only one to be defending her titles as a champ. And Valentina Shevchenko, dominant performance in the flyweight division. I don't see who could stop her. She may very well call it a day as a champ. I don't see who could stop her. She's so dominant in that division. And but of course, there's always new contenders and new names that are going to be coming up in that division. Again, back-to-back fights, 3 titles on the night, and all 3 title fights delivered. Just before that fight, Chris Weidman, Uriah Hall, the fight that had a history dating back to before either of these fighters even joined the UFC. They faced off against each other back in the day in New York, and where Chris Weidman got the better of Uriah Hall, stops the scary Uriah Hall back then, and then moves on to the UFC to become the champ, the middleweight champ, by taking the title from Anderson Silva years later. Of course, this fight had history between the camps, had history between the fighters, and they're both at the latter end of their respective careers. But of course, the freak accident that happened, almost like a karmic effect that took place that night. Chris Weidman ends up just destroying his leg. He goes for a calf kick and his leg just looks like linguine. It just flops every which direction. He screams in agony, and the karmic effect of what happened to Anderson Silva against Chris Weidman seems to have that similar injury came to haunt Chris Weidman in his career now. Nasty, nasty injury. Chris Weidman, the fight is stopped. He loses by TKO in at the 17-second mark of round 1. The fight was just starting, and this injury that Anderson Silva, the great spider, the great Anderson Silva suffered against Chris Weidman, that similar injury came back to haunt Chris Weidman himself. He drops to a 15-6 record. Uriah Hall improves to an 18-9 record, and I'm sure they're going to want to run this back. I don't know if Chris Weidman's even going to come back to the UFC. This is another loss that he suffers, and he may very well be on his way out. Anthony Smith, just before that fight and that freak injury happened, Anthony Smith knocks out Jimmy Crute. 12-2 record for Jimmy Crute. Anthony Smith improves to a 35-16 record. Again, Anthony Smith continues to climb back. He had that nasty loss to John Jones and then has had some setbacks there during his career and is still a who's who in the light heavyweight division and continues to climb up. Maybe he'll fight Jiri Prochazka to decide who goes against Blachowicz, but Jiri Prochazka looked really good against Dominic Reyes. Anthony Smith continues to cement himself as a who's who in the light heavyweight division, and he's there. He's winning, he's delivering, he's performing each time out. So Anthony Smith, always fun to watch. Alex Oliveira against Randy Brown. He is submitted. Randy Brown submits Alex Oliveira. They have bad blood between the two. That was another fight that was interesting. And I think right around that fight is when my attention started going to a different level during UFC 261. The Randy Brown-Alex Oliveira fight was such an entertaining fight. When Randy Brown stops Oliveira, I thought Cowboy was going to win that fight. Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Randy Brown ends up submitting him in round 1. And I knew we were in for something. That was a special fight. That fight caught my eye a lot. Just before that, all the other ones I was watching, Dwight Grant was there just fighting before that. Carl Roberson always delivers, but failed to do so on this night. Brendan Allen actually submitted Carl Roberson, and I thought that was going to be a slobber knocker of a fight, just going back and forth and possibly see a knockout there. It ended up being anything but. Carl Roberson was actually looking to keep that fight on its feet. Brendan Allen submits him. And the early prelims, I mean, those were entertaining as well, the early prelims. But once the main event card took place, it was one after the next, after the next, after the next. And they were all shocking in their own right. And you just couldn't get enough. By the time that the night ended, you almost walked away from that card tired. You were tired of watching. You didn't know what else to expect. Each fight offered its own entertainment. Anthony Smith to Uriah Hall to Shevchenko to Thug Rose to the Kamaru Usman rematch versus Jorge Masvidal. Every single fight presented something different. They all ended in different fashion, but they all ended with a little bit of awe and a little bit of shock to them. Amazing. So now we go a week later to Jiri Prochazka with that amazing knockout of Dominic Reyes, and I almost feel like I didn't do it justice. I couldn't really appreciate it because I still had UFC 261 in my head, and then we move on to this coming weekend, in which the card is stacked again. It's bound to deliver, and just like we called at the beginning of the show, Amanda Ribas, Angela Hill. That's a fight to look forward to. Carlos Diego Ferreira in the main event, in the main card, part of the main card, following Amanda Ribas Hill. Carlos Diego Ferreira against Gregor Gillespie, who makes his return. Neil Magny, Jeff Neal's bound to deliver. Donald Cerrone in the co-main event against Alex Morono. I hate to say it, and I hate to bet against Donald Cerrone, but I think Alex Morono might get the best of Donald Cerrone in that co-main event fight. And then Michelle Waterson, Marina Rodriguez moved up to the new main event slot as TJ Dillashaw suffers an injury, and that fight's going to be postponed against Corey Sandhagen for later on this, most likely this summer. So a lot to look forward to this weekend. Of course, this is an MMA. As far as boxing goes, that's going to take most of the attention this weekend in Canelo against BJ Saunders, Frank Sanchez fighting against Negi Aguilera in the undercard. So the Canelo show is in town. That's going to be in Dallas. That's going to take the attention of the Cinco de Mayo weekend. But UFC is bound to put on, and they stacked up this card on purpose to see if they could take some viewers away from the Canelo slot. It's going to be live on ESPN as well, free. So of course Canelo's going to take a hit with the viewership since they're on the zone and a pay-per-view. So the UFC is doing their thing. The UFC has not let down. This is the second. UFC 261 was the second 3-title fight card that they put on in 2021 alone, and they continue to deliver, and their matchmaking is an all-time high right now for the UFC. Just look at this. Look at what they're about to put on this coming weekend. So keep an eye out for that. Like I said, I haven't recovered from UFC 261 yet, but I'm sure that if the year started like this already, it's bound to get better. These fights are almost so good, so consistently good, week in and week out, that you're starting to forget about Adesanya having performed earlier this year and all the other fights that took place. As your Stipe Miocic losing his title to Francis Ngannou. It almost seems like it was years ago, and it just happened a few weeks back because of the great matchmaking and the great content that the UFC is putting out. It seems like those fights happened eons ago, and it just happened a few weeks back. We're just a few weeks removed from when Stipe lost his reign as one of the most decorated heavyweight champs in UFC history. Francis Ngannou now has that title. Adesanya, Kamaru Usman, representing all of African descent, representing Africa and holding them high. 3 champs of African descent. Couldn't get any better, right? With that said, enjoy this weekend. UFC is bound to represent. I'll talk to you all soon. Welcome back to the Toma Todito show, and stay tuned for more episodes. I'll be putting out several episodes here in the next few days. So have a good one. Talk to you all soon. Take care.